Hello YouTube and people of the interwebs, welcome back to another Doctor Who video. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the recent comments made by the fantastic, see what I did there, fantastic, Christopher Eccleston, the actor who played the 9th Doctor all the way back in 2005. He's recently talked in a Comic-Con panel about his future of being in the Doctor Who franchise and whether there's ever a possibility that we'll see him reprise the role of the 9th Doctor. Now, obviously, we're just off the back of seeing David Tennant return as the 10th Doctor, who also started in 2005. Now, David had a much happier time on the show and has been a lot less vocal about any behind-the-scenes problems or things. I might as well just play you the headlines, the main thing he said at this Comic-Con panel, and his terms and conditions for returning to the role of the 9th Doctor in live action.
Now, what would have to happen for that to become a reality?
Sack Russell T Davies, sack Jane Tranter, sack Phil Collinson, sack Julie Gardner, and I'll come back. So can you arrange that?
If you follow Eccleston on any form of social media, you'll know he's not afraid to say exactly how he feels, which you can see from that clip there. He's very, very vocal on political issues and things that mean a lot to him personally, and it's very, very clear that whatever happened back when he was playing the Doctor in 2005, of which we still don't know the full truth of, it really affected him. However, I do think it's interesting to note that Billie Piper seemingly isn't exactly on the same wavelength as he is. I mean, she sat next to him, and I'll just replay a little bit of the clip, but if we zoom in on her face, she doesn't fully look like she agrees with everything Chris says. So yeah, I think that's also an interesting thing to consider.
Back. So can you arrange that?
It's not for me to say what actually happened there, because I wasn't there. I've just been watching these episodes of Doctor Who and absolutely loving them. As a kid, I remember Eccleston being one of my favourite Doctors, and I still think all these years later that Series 1 of the revived show is, one of, if not, I wouldn't say it's the strongest, but it's definitely top 3 strongest seasons of Doctor Who ever, and it is such a shame that Christopher Eccleston feels this way. However, it doesn't mean he hates the Doctor as a character, and I don't think he hates the cast or the crew for the most part who he worked with, because he also had this to say about Doctor Who.
Love being associated with a character, just don't like being associated with those people and the politics that went on in the first series. The first series was a mess, and it wasn't to do with me or Billy. It was to do with the people who were supposed to make it, and it was a mess. First series, nobody wants to know. The BBC were like, we're going to keep a big distance from this. And then as soon as it was a success, they were all up close going, I was responsible for that, but they were all like at a distance, like this is a folly, Eccleston's folly, Piper's folly, Russell T Davies's folly. And then when it worked, suddenly, oh yeah, I worked on that. They wouldn't come anywhere near us. And then they jump on the bandwagon.
I think it's interesting there that he mentions Russell as well as being thrown into this sort of the BBC going, it's their mess, not ours, we're not going to associate ourselves with it, until it proved to be the hit success that it still is to this day. I can understand why, from Eccleston's perspective, this is something which would annoy him and would upset him. And I'm hoping that the BBC, all these years later, has kind of moved away from this sort of approach of mistreating its actors and directors, casting people, etc. In terms of Eccleston returning, I don't think there's a single chance that it's going to happen anytime soon, because obviously Russell and all of the aforementioned people mentioned by Eccleston are currently at the helm of the show again. I do think there was a possibility, maybe the only and last chance we had of getting Eccleston back would have been as one of the Guardians of the Edge during Power of the Doctor, because Eccleston has been very, very vocal about his support and his love of Jodie Whittaker in the role of the 13th Doctor. And obviously, if you remember back to her final episode, The Power of the Doctor, we had a bunch of returning classic Doctors who, yeah, they came to sort of give Jodie's Doctor a little push and say, come on, you can make it through. And it would have been fantastic to see Eccleston there. And I do think if he was asked, then he would have possibly come back for that. I don't think that any of the new Who Doctors were consulted for the Guardians of the Edge stuff because, well, one, Tennant was about to make his return anyway. Two, I think Chris Chibnall wanted to leave the 60th anniversary as a sort of New Who celebration, similar to the way Day of the Doctor celebrated the two biggest New Who Doctors at the time. I think, yeah, that was the idea. And then obviously Matt Smith, he would have probably come back if asked, because he always talks about how much he loves Doctor Who. Peter Capaldi, I think that he's sadly, despite being my favourite Doctor, I don't think he'll ever come back. He says multi-Doctor stories aren't for him, as does Russell T Davies, which, I mean, fair enough. I personally love multi-Doctor stories, but I don't know whether that's just the sort of fan part of my brain going, it's so cool to see all of these childhood heroes interacting. Speaking of Day of the Doctor, this was the last time Eccleston was actually asked by the BBC and the production crew to come back to the show, and he didn't, as history reveals. I mean, the original plan for the 50th is something that's delved into by this article from the Radio Times, in which it says Christopher Eccleston turned down Doctor Who's 50th anniversary because it didn't do justice to the 9th Doctor, and he says he was still waiting for a BBC apology anyway. I do think if the script was strong enough and enough to Eccleston's liking, maybe if Stephen Moffat hadn't been sort of as overworked as he was, because obviously during 2013 he was working on multiple seasons of Doctor Who, Sherlock, the Tintin movie, so much stuff there, so there probably wasn't a script ready to give Eccleston, like, right away, which, yeah, probably led to him not coming back. Eccleston said at this Comic-Con a couple of years ago, when the Day of the Doctor came along, I did speak to them. I didn't feel that what they were asking me to do did justice to the 9th Doctor, so I said no. Yeah, that's completely fair enough. It is up to him at the end of the day, and while it is a shame that the 9th Doctor never actually came back, we did get John Hurt's War Doctor, who Eccleston speaks very, very highly of in a later quote. Eccleston also revealed that he still felt hurt by his treatment upon leaving Doctor Who in 2005, having previously spoken at length about how he had lost faith in the production team during filming and threatened legal action over a statement that the BBC had put out about his departure. Eccleston says that they approached him to be in the Day of the Doctor, but the BBC still had not apologised to him. Now, he says that he liked Stephen Moffat a lot. He did consider it, but what happened in 2005 had an enormous emotional impact on him. As the series was going out, as the series was being celebrated, he was vilified in the press in the UK because of the statement that the BBC had issued. Now, this statement that he's referring to, we think, was a quote put out by the BBC which effectively said that Eccleston was tired. Eccleston had, the filming Doctor Who Season 1 took him out. He was too tired to carry on, so he wasn't going to remain in the role of the Doctor, which obviously that is a horrific quote to be attributed to an actor, because why would anyone hire them after that? They'd go, oh, well, no, Eccleston's the guy that gets tired, despite it being completely untrue. So I do see why Eccleston was incredibly frustrated at the BBC during this time, and he even goes on to say that it caused quite a depression in him later that year, while everybody was going, Doctor Who's great, and he's gone, because the BBC kind of smeared him and told lies about him. However, as mentioned, Eccleston ultimately thinks that him not returning to Day of the Doctor ultimately improved the episode, as he says that John Hurt is a fantastic actor, and ultimately probably a better actor than him. I wouldn't necessarily agree, Chris. I think Eccleston is fantastic, on par with John Hurt. All of the New Who Doctors are, they're brilliant actors. And while, in my opinion, John Hurt is fantastic, it would have been so nice to see the 9th Doctor in Day of the Doctor. It would have just felt so complete. But yeah, it's just a shame that that's the way history played out, because I would absolutely love to have seen like a Tales of the TARDIS between the Ninth Doctor and Rose. I mean, Billie Piper says in this very same Comic-Con panel that she'd be more than up for returning, especially now. And I mean, it's not like we don't have any Ninth Doctor stuff at all. We do have the Big Finish range of Ninth Doctor stories, of which I admittedly haven't listened to any of yet. I haven't got time to listen to much Big Finish, which is a shame because the stories that I have heard really intrigued me, so I will get round to this eventually. At the Comic-Con panel, Eccleston and Piper did also discuss whether they'd do a Big Finish story together, and basically just said if they pay them enough money, then they will, which completely fair enough. But yeah, that does bring us to the end of today's video. If you did enjoy, please do remember to like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill. Thank you very much for watching. Stay up to date with all the latest and greatest Doctor Who news on this channel by clicking on the notification bell to make sure you never miss out on a video. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.